Hi, my name is Denise Gammon. I am the Education and Outreach Specialist for CVWMA, and I hope you're having a fantastic summer so far. Today, we are going to bring you a book and a craft. Today's book is Extra Yarn, and the craft actually uses yarn and cardboard to make a really cute little bird. So stick around for the craft, but first, Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett, illustrated by John Klassen. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where where you looked was either the white of snow or black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too, but there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and Miss Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone, except for Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters, or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweaters for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she made sweaters for all the dogs, and all the cats, and for the other animals too. Soon people thought, soon Annabelle will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1 million. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. $2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10 million, he shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house. They stole the box and took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and who sailed over the sea. Back to his castle. The Archduke put on his favorite song, sat in his best chair, then he took out the box, and he lifted its lid and looked inside. His mustache quivered, it shivered, it trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out of the window and shouted, "Little girl, I will curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." But it turned out she was. And that was Extra Yarn, written by Mac Barnett and illustrated by John Clayson. All right, so our book again was Extra Yarn, and our craft today is going to need extra yarn that you might have laying around the house, some scissors, and a piece of cardboard. And so I have this really great colored cardboard here. The first thing you're gonna do, there's really just 2 steps to this project. So the first step is cutting your shape out of the cardboard. I did a bird, I already cut him out, but you can do whatever shape you want to. Maybe you want to work on some of those shape skills, shape identifying abilities over the summer, and so you can cut a square or a triangle or rectangle or whatever you want to out of this cardboard. I do recommend that whatever you do, make your shape interesting so your kids have a lot of interesting edges to wrap the yarn around and kind of make it a neat sort of feel to it. My other suggestion is to get some really fun and funky yarn. So the yarn that I have here is actually homespun yarn, so it has a thick, thin feel to it, and that can make the bird project a little more tactile, a little more sensory engaging. And if you get different types of yarn, you can talk about how soft it is or how rough it is or what have you, or the colors as well. My other secret trick is you don't need glue for this project. So when you're done with the bird, as long as it doesn't have any glue or glitter or anything crazy on it, it can be recycled as long as it's big. Remember, no shredded paper. Shredded paper causes contamination. So cut your bird out, snip 2 snips, one at the end and one at the front. And I recommend adults or older kids doing the bird cutting and snipping, and then give your kiddo the yarn to wrap. And you might want to start it for them, or you might be able to teach them how to pop that in there. And then I'm right-handed, so we'll switch that. And then you can wrap and wrap and wrap. And whenever they decide they're done, they're full, or they run out of yarn, you're just gonna find that other end and pop it into place. You can snip the end there if you want to, leave a little bit of a drag, that's up to you. If you feel like you want it to be displayed or hung, just take another little bit of extra yarn, loop it through the top so that it can be hung. Another way that you can do this is that if you cut out your shape and you don't want to wrap it, maybe you want the kids to do some weaving, get a hole punch and punch holes along the edge of the cardboard, and then they can work on the back and forth motor skills, that fine motor ability. So that easy peasy simple summer project can be done with reused cardboard and some extra yarn. So if you make this for yourself or your kids make it, please share it with us on Instagram or Facebook or one of our social media accounts, because we'd love to see what you're doing to reuse your material over the summer. Thanks again for joining us. And again, the book was extra yarn, and I hope you have a fantastic summer.